Hi, Nirupa. Welcome to Money Meets Emotions, where we talk about your relationship with money. I'm introducing Nirupa Konijeti, who runs Bazaar New York City. She essentially runs separate clubs every single month, which is a fusion of American and Indian food. Dinners with 18 people, and I'm so excited to introduce her today. Hi, Nirupa.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's just get started on a little bit about your background.
Yeah.
So tell me a 60-second elevator pitch of what Bazaar New York City is.
Yeah, so Bazaar is basically a South Asian communal dining pop up that happens once a month straight out of my apartment. It came from, a life event when that happened to me about 2 years ago, where, I was just craving community. I was trying to find my people outside of my circle. And it also was a way to make that space for other people like me who were trying to do things outside of the regular drinking norm, going to bars. I'm alcohol free, so I needed something that was a little bit more intentional.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of sit down and do things differently than, most people. And I'm sure a lot of them also feel the same way. And I luckily have a background in food.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, and I just try to put two and two together to see if there's some way of this idea to manifest, and that's basically how the whole supper club scene was born. And because my roots are from India, I just figured, like, why not take a South Asian take on modern cuisine? And
Yeah.
I just think that it's so familiar yet, excitingly new when you do that. And
Yeah.
people love actually coming and, trying, putting themselves out there, trying to meet people, be a part of intentional, joyful dining.
And people love food.
Yeah.
Typically, like strangers, like what?
Everyone comes solo, most likely for our dinners, and a
So
lot of them
cool.
are actually women. 80% of women, 20% are men. Sometimes we have higher men coming in who actually kind of want to sit down and like have a chat with like all
Aw.
feelings, which doesn't happen a lot, but it's refreshing to see when that happens.
So obviously, I run a newsletter around money and the psychology of money. And money is as polarizing, if not more, than religion and politics. So I really wanted to get your take on your relationship with money and building Bazaar in a place like New York City. So first, I would love to ask you, like, what was money like growing up? Like, what kind of relationship did you have with it? How was money talked about with like your family and your parents?
Yeah, I mean, great question. You're kind of making me go back like 20 years into my history.
Yeah.
I grew up, in India, and I grew up in a middle class family. And, money was not something that was widely available in the time I grew up. There was definitely a feeling of scarcity. Um, my mom's a housewife, so my dad was the main breadwinner of our house. And there was definitely a lot of pressure around money. And, a lot of people that I was around at that time were, coming from wealthy families, well to do families. So it was definitely a piece that I was trying to fit in. At the same time, I did feel like, oh, this is a little bit out of my reach when they would
Yeah.
go do things a certain way. But it is very, very empowering to now be, in a place where you're kind of making the bread, if it's like you're, single family household, whatever is the case. I think it definitely changes how you look at money. But at the same time, a lot of my roots, of course, are Indian, so I'm very careful with money, but a
Mhm.
little bit more experimentative, just because it lets you play that here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, that makes me think of, do you think you like are a risk averse person, a risk seeking person?
Yeah, pre-bazaar actually I was very risk averse, but now we're in like the bazaar zone, so I'm definitely risk taking, and a lot
Aw.
of the risks are taking risks on myself, right?
Yeah.
That does give you long term gains doing that. But I grew up in a very risk averse household where savings were a big thing. Having a solid 9 to 5, my dad would work in like one job and they would have that for all of their life until they retire and sort of rely on that. But now I think if you don't take risks, you also don't have, payoffs that happen.
Yeah.
So, it could be either or, but I think it's worth giving a shot.
Yeah. So when you think of money versus like maybe when you were 10 versus now, what were things that came up? Like what kind of emotions came up for you?
Um, Scarcity was one for sure. Responsibility was another one as well. Now, my feeling with money is a little bit more, has shifted. I think it's a little bit more around, I want to have a legacy, which is one thing.
Okay.
I want to have opportunity, which is another thing. So let's say if I have a child one day, I want to be able to have, give them that, take on money where they have
Yeah.
some legacy, and they also have an opportunity to sort of do something with it. The world that I grew up in was more so around responsibility, which is very, very important, and lack of freedom, right? Try to work like small jobs when I was in India, but my parents were always sort of like shooting the idea down, saying, "Oh, like you don't do jobs, like you don't work in stores. It's not a thing." But when you
Yeah.
kind of come to America, it's automatically, a breadwinning piece to kind of pay your rent or like do something with that money. So that was never a problem. But yes, now I think money definitely is a little bit different, but also it helped me gain a lot of financial independence. So I'm
Yeah.
so much more independent, and it gives you so much confidence when you sort of enter that zone where you
Yeah.
essentially are producing money,
Yeah.
doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah. I'm so curious to hear, like, once you felt financially independent, was that when you felt your relationship with money shift?
I still feel like I keep going back and forth, to be honest with you. New York City is a very expensive city to live in. So I
So
think
expensive.
obviously that kind of throws the whole, Indian like take on money out the door. But I, you know, in my parents' eyes, I'm obviously like spending a lot more than I should be spending. But there's no other way to survive in New York City. You just have to do what you got to do. I'm definitely more risk taking, right? That's the part we
Mhm.
talked about. More experimenting with money. I take risks on myself now, and a lot of them is essentially, you're gonna you're kind of like putting that money in, doing something for now, which will have payoffs. Whether it is a hit or a flop is a different thing, but I think you would never know until you never try.
Well, I remember when we first chatted, we talked about how you actually really wanted to go to culinary school back in the day, right? And at that time, it wasn't really a possibility based on conversations you were having with like your family. But then you started hosting like supper clubs in college, and you always had this like real love for food. So I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that and how you decided to take these baby steps of risks to now start Bazaar as like the supper club that it is in New York City, which honestly I feel like has like a deep community in New York.
Yeah, it's you're making me think a lot with this question. But 10 years ago, when I was in India, I fell in love with baking so much so that I wanted to basically shift careers. I was studying to
Oh.
be a software engineer, absolutely hated it. I still don't like it, which is actually kind of, my day job. To make the the funny part of it is, I did switch from software to product, but 10 years ago, I wanted to basically go and be a pastry chef. And the first idea I presented to my dad, he just completely shut it down, saying, like, you're absolutely not doing that. This is like a disgrace. Like, you're making like minimal wage. Can't happen. Obviously, didn't have enough life, experience to sort of debate with him. So, I completely shut down that idea and, did what any other Indian person would do is like, come to America, like go to grad school, like, find a job and kind of, build a life here. But going back to how Bazaar started, 2 years ago, I was working for, it's like my dream tech job in a startup, very fancy on paper. But, one day I was just laid off, plain and simple, had nothing but a severance check, right? Huge pit in my stomach, didn't know what to do with it. And I was in a lot of rage. And that rage came from the idea of doing something that no one can ever take away from me. I think a lot of my personality or like my identity was driven from having a job,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And that was taken away. So what do I have now? I was trying to find who I was.
Yeah.
And I had this, always had this passion of doing something with food that never saw the daylight of it. So I just figured I would jump in and see what I could do with that skill set. Like I said, I'm a trained pastry chef. I did work
Yeah.
in India in a restaurant for a whole summer, so I do have that skill set in my
That is
back
so
pocket.
cool.
And just
So
didn't know what
cool.
to do with that skill set. I just figured now I have the chance, I have the time. I had 6 months in between jobs, and here I was, going, trying things, researching, trying to figure out what people like me are looking to do. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's trying to struggle in this economy of like, I don't drink, like, I don't like going to bars anymore. I'm a changed person.
There's totally the
Where do I
sober
find
curious
things?
movement now
Yeah,
happening,
and
right?
I
Yeah.
was really intentional with forming friendships in that time that I was in. I still am like that. So where do you go and meet people, right? It's not easy to make friends in New York as much as it seems like. So it's a big city, but everyone has their own groups and cliques. So how do you sort of find people who are, free willed, trying to be more intentional about wellness, health, whatever is the case? So I just went to a few things, tried a few ways, and I figured that, what, I'm going to do this my way and see how this works. And over time, within like the first 7 to 8 months, it was definitely a slow growth period. But the minute people started sort of like knowing about that. It was a lot of social proof, a lot of word of mouth. I think it attracted a huge South Asian population
Aw.
who were trying to find their people, right? People still message me till this date saying, I'm missing home a lot. I would love to meet other people in the community. And
Aw.
when you sort of enter someone's home, your walls are automatically down because you're automatically entering a very private environment.
It's very
And my
intimate,
goal,
vulnerable,
it's
yeah.
very intimate. And my goal is to make sure that, food is just a means to something bigger with this whole idea, right?
Mhm.
It's a supper club. Yes, there's incredible food on the plate, but my idea is to sit down with someone, have a meal for 3 to 4 hours. Like you automatically will have your walls down and you will try to get to know that person and you end up leaving most likely as friends. And worst case, you know what? You'll probably remember that night and be like, that was such a cool day.
Yeah. Well, that's so beautiful, especially in a day and age where everyone feels so isolated being on their phones, and
Yeah.
just like New York doesn't really make it much easier with the
Yeah.
hustle and bustle. You had this idea, you got laid off from your tech job, and you were like, "Oh my, I had like an identity crisis of sorts." A lot of people, they'll take that and then go back on the conventional path. But then you took that rage and you were like, "I'm going to go and start a supper club for New York City." What did that look like? How did that idea become reality? How did
Yeah.
you actually execute that? Because I would love to hear
Yeah.
like how those first few supper clubs looks and like how that has transitioned as you've
Yeah.
like today, you
Yeah.
know?
So the whole, I think, like, the crisis happened 2 years ago, and again the whole idea of like wanting to do something began 2 years ago. But I was for a while hosting, like, Indian street food cooking classes in the building that I was living in
Oh,
with the
so cool.
residents.
Yeah.
Just I was just trying to experiment things and see what sticks, right? So I did
Yeah.
that. I would host events for the residents within the building, which people actually really loved. So we would teach them how to make pani puri, dahi puri, and all of those things, and it was very
Were these like
interactive.
all Indian people or was it like a mix of
Like a building like this, residents would just kind of show up like an event.
wow, that's so
Yeah, I
cool.
asked like my property manager, and then she was like, yeah, let's do one. And we used to do one every single month. So that was something I was trying. At the same time, I was also trying to kind of dabble with the whole like dinner party idea, because 2 years ago, I think, or a year and a half ago, is when like New York started having this whole like movement and like dinner parties, and the whole supper club scene was actually just beginning to take off. So I felt like that was something that I could definitely try.
Aw.
And it sort of opens the idea to a much larger audience, right? Not everyone wants to go to a cooking class. So would you go to a restaurant? Most definitely you will. And the eating part out is like a huge thing in New York.
Yeah.
Now you're just kind of converting the whole like eating out, but like you're kind of taking that and putting it into an apartment scene, which
Yeah.
is very unique. It's more like a hidden supper club idea, so it creates some curiosity with people, and they're like, I wonder what this is about.
Yeah.
So I started doing that when I launched Bazaar
Okay.
exactly a year ago. And the
A year
dinners,
ago. Oh,
yeah, yeah. So
congratulations.
we've just made a year. We've
Wow.
fed over 200 people, maybe
That's so
250
cool.
people
Wow.
in total.
Yeah.
And the dinners were very simple when they started a year ago. It was a simple three-course menu, but now they've evolved so much. I put a lot of thought. We do a lot of collabs every single month with different, like, wine producers. We do collabs with a lot of like produce partners, and my idea is to basically outshine the produce and bring all the beauty onto a plate. And I'm way more experimentative in my cooking methods than I was basically a year ago. And
That risk
it's a
seeking,
whole
man.
production now versus what it used to be a year ago. But I also, my main goal is to keep the intimacy element of that still intact, because when you scale things over time, a lot of them lose the intimacy fact. I've been to bigger supper clubs, I've been to 40% dinners, but I just felt like it was lacking something that was kind of like sticking everyone together. So my goal is to make sure, number one priority is to make sure intimacy is still there in every
Mhm.
supper club and people feel warm and fuzzy when they leave, you know?
Yeah. And do you feel like when people leave your supper club, they do feel that?
They do. So I actually make every single person write a sticky note when before they leave. And in my apartment, when you come in, there's a wall of stickies, and that wall has kind of filled up. I'm trying to figure out ways to be more,
Oh my
in
god, it's like a
smart
wall
with
of
like, it's
gratitude.
my wall of fame. I
Oh
call
my
it. So every morning when the night after the supper club, I wake up and I just like sit on like again like on the floor looking at the wall reading what people have left. And it's just a, when you have a shitty day, it's kind of a nice reminder when you go read those things, because it was a great, beautiful evening.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Well,
people leave all kinds of notes behind. Some people have doodles on there, some people really are like, I really wanted this.
yeah.
And it's just, I think, again a reminder that there's there's things that can make you feel great, there's things that can make you feel empty, and my goal is to try to fill that gap.
That is so beautiful. Thanks for sharing. Yeah, I know you also so you still work your 9 to 5
Yeah.
in a tech job, but your 5 to 9 essentially is
Yeah.
working Bazaar. So, I think a lot of people ask, okay, I can do a 5 to 9 for maybe like 3 months, but that motivation to keep going has to come from something more than motivation, right? Because motivation dies. So, what is that intrinsic level that keeps you going on that 5 to 9?
Yeah, it's so funny you asked that because I am someone who's very difficult to stick with habits.
Hmm.
I don't.
Hmm.
Um, and I always have like, started ideas, but they've, kind of like dropped, or it's what kind of makes you stick is the question that you're
Hmm.
asking, right? I don't know. Good question. But
You
I
must
just
really
feel,
love what you're doing.
yeah, I think that's probably what it is. I speak with a lot of people on a daily basis, and I usually ask them, like, do you really love what you do? And I always felt like I had like, a pit when people said, I love what I do, I love my job. I just never had that. I still don't have that with my 9 to 5. I think it's, definitely a means to, live a lifestyle of, a certain sort, and, gives you the freedom to do other things outside of the job. And if you're good at it, I think, that's completely fine. There's no shame in admitting that. So I don't love my job, but I think I can, do a decent job, and it works, and it's been
Mhm.
working the last decade.
Yeah.
So I think it's purely because the love for it. I think I'm really obsessed with doing that.
Aw.
And when you're obsessed with something, you don't really care about the outcome. You'll just keep going at it.
Yeah.
And I think that's the fuel that fires you every
I
single
get
month.
that.
And I
Yeah.
feel like as we have grown, that was basically a reminder to keep going.
Yeah.
And like I said, I've had people send me notes when they kind of found out about Bazaar, and that was so much more validation for me. 2 months ago, we got onto Vogue. I woke up one morning, we got featured on Vogue, which was crazy. I didn't even know that was happening. But
That is so
again,
cool.
the wildest dreams, like as a kid growing up, like I never thought that would even happen. So I
Yeah.
think it's just like a manifestation that was kind of like happening in
Yeah.
real life with me. And that's when I felt this is something,
Yeah.
I shouldn't give up on this. I don't think I ever will. I don't know how it's going to shape up in the next couple of years, but I think
Yeah.
right now my goal is to one, my theme for the year is play. I want to play. I want to have fun.
Ah, I love that.
And I don't want this to feel like a job. That is my number one priority. So I'm just trying to have fun in the process, and I love what I do right now. It is very stressful because this is a one woman project. Cooking
Yeah.
for 18 people is not a joke.
It
I'm
is not a
probably
joke.
standing on my feet for 3 days and I'm
Yeah.
dead on the inside. But I love doing it. I don't know how to describe it. It's just it I'm just going with it
No,
every
I
single
think it's
day.
so funny. This is such a small example, but even when your mother like cooks like a good meal for you, like whenever I go home and my mom makes me a meal, I can see the love in her eyes. She must be really tired like doing it,
Yeah.
but there's a love exchange that's happening when you're
Yeah.
giving someone like your own food, like
Yep.
hand cooked food,
Yeah,
right?
and it shows. It's difficult to actually quantify that, but when you cook
I
with
know.
love, you can taste it.
Yes, I fully
Yep.
agree. Okay, so I, as a Telugu woman, my mom, when I was younger, used to feed me with her hand. And I still swear by this day that the food coming from her hand is better than a spoon. I don't know what it is. I
Oh,
really don't.
I'm gonna drop a bomb, and the bomb is whenever my parents still come visit me here right now, my mom feeds me with her hand.
Wait, sometimes my mom, like, I get
Still
that.
do,
Yeah,
still do,
it's
and
so good.
yep, yep. I have no shame in admitting this. I love my mom feeding me food through her hands.
It's just such an act of love.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
understand.
and it tastes so good.
It tastes
When I
so
eat it with a
good.
spoon, I'm just like, this is not the same.
I feel a little bit empty inside, you know?
Yeah, I don't like the taste of metal in my mouth.
Oh my god, I'm so glad that you agreed with me. Okay.
Thank you, thank you. I feel
I feel
seen.
seen. Bazaar is your passion project, but it is something that you are making money from today. So, when you first started Bazaar, did you think about it from like a monetary perspective, or did you think about it as purely like I want to feed people? And then after that, you were like, oh, this is something I could monetize on.
I think if I'm being very honest, the whole layoff period that happened, right? I just moved into a very nice studio that I was, paying a decent amount of money for. And 3 months into moving in, I was laid off or whatever is the
Yeah,
case. So I'm like, oh shit, like I'm like now gonna basically burn my savings.
yeah,
And but starting, I think all like the dinner parties and like before Bazaar officially even existed, the idea was I want to be able to pay my rent in one way or the other form,
No,
right?
that's so real.
Yeah, and I,
Yeah.
I had to wait for a job to actually kind of start. Unless that happened, I couldn't make money. So I was like, what else can I do to make money? And I was doing all the cooking classes, I was doing other things. It was basically a way to pay my rent to begin with in the
Yeah.
beginning. But as I've kind of figured that piece out, it then became, well, I have that financial part stabilized, I have a job now. What do I want to do with this?
Hmm.
That was when it purely became an idea that manifested from creation. The the need to create, the need to experiment, the need to form a community,
Yeah.
and it's purely coming from experimentation and less of how much I make. I actually don't even count
Yeah.
my spending slash savings with Bazaar every month. I think my idea again is like the main theme is to play, and I think it just like lets me do that. There's obviously some money that I'm making with it, but I've never sat down and kind of measured that. We've definitely increased the dining size from
Hmm.
12 to 18. There's obviously, I think, like more tickets now around the table. That was not because I wanted to make more money per se. That was because there were people who basically
They're
found
interested.
Bazaar.
There's like demand. Yeah.
Yeah, and they've been trying to come for dinners, and someone messaged me saying I've been trying to come for the last three dinners, but I haven't gotten a ticket.
Oh, yeah.
And I don't think this is like one of those Michelin star restaurants where you're making a person wait 4 months to get in. And I was just like, I don't want them to wait 4 months to do that, right?
Oh,
So that's
yeah.
maybe the reason why we've kind of added the extra seats and had an 18% dining setup. But that was mostly the goal. Money is never the motive for me with Bazaar. I think I want to be able to do what I do, and I have a non-creative job. So my idea is, how do I instill creativity in my day-to-day?
Yeah.
This is the way to instill creativity. So whatever it takes to kind of create and like produce an event of that sort, I will go like full length to do that. So that's kind of what drives me to sort of like make this happen every month. Less so about the money actually.
I love
Yeah.
that. Do you think that there would ever come a point? I know you said this year's theme is play, and obviously you can't predict the future and things always change, but is there ever a plan or a dream of yours to make Bazaar something full time?
I would love that. I would secretly love that. I think I want to, have financial freedom. Like most people say, right? I want to hit financial freedom by 35, whatever is the case. The idea is you wake up and you exactly know how you're going to spend your day without being like, oh, I have to go to this job. That is essentially my goal. Whenever
Yeah, if you ever watch
I
Severance,
don't have
it
a
gives
time,
off vibes. So,
I don't have timeline to do that. But if there's a way for me doing this full time, 200% obsessed with that idea of making that
yeah,
happen, right? To your question, how do I see Bazaar sort of like, going in the direction long term? I don't know. I think right now it's still, to me, it's not a business, it's a passion project. I still feel like, it's a thing that I do to sort of fulfill my creative like needs slash gaps every month. But if there's a world where this could be, a full-time thing, I definitely want to diversify the pop-ups, the kind of dinner parties that we do. I think there's a lot of opportunity with collab in the space. I would love to, work with other vendors, other founders, and sort of do that a little bit more, or also even have like different types of pop-ups. Maybe
yeah,
even have a physical space that kind of lets people do this. I don't know. I think there's a lot of directions that we can pursue with it, but I would love to do it this full time. It is very difficult because people don't understand that working in hospitality is very physically demanding and
oh my
draining.
God, yeah,
And I have a lot of respect for chefs and a lot of respect for people running restaurants, because there's not a lot of money in that, to be very honest. Restaurants
yeah,
have a very small margin. They do it because they're absolutely obsessed with doing that.
yeah,
So I hope to get to that point where I have the financial freedom and I can just do this day in and out. And I want to be a part of that group where they say, oh my god, like I love my job, this is what I do.
yeah.
That would be amazing to kind of be in a position to do.
Oh, I love that. Well, I hope that happens for you one day. I honestly see you going in that direction
I hope
because
that I whatever your dreams are, I hope that happens to you
thank you
too.
so much. I appreciate you, Nirupa. And on one last question,
Yeah.
and I think I asked this before, but I usually do like when I do my street interviews with like random strangers, I like to ask them like what is the number. Oh my god.
We're
Okay.
fine. We're survived.
What is the number one thing you think of when you hear the word money today
For myself or in general,
for yourself?
power, 100% power. I grew up in a place where I didn't necessarily have money, a lot of money growing up. So I think now being in that position is very, very empowering and uplifting to make decisions. And I feel like money is so powerful coming from a place where a lot of women are housewives. At the time that I grew up in, my mom is one, and I so wish that she sort of had her own path of defining money and that power. But power is what stands out to me. Money
Yeah.
can make or break things. It's actually true, and being in that position where you can call the shots, make the shots, is there's nothing more liberal than doing that.
Yeah, and money provides options. Like even if one day you didn't want to make a lot of money,
Yep.
just like even having the knowledge is power to know. Like honestly, having a bank account, even something as simple as that, gives
Yeah.
you access card to the world,
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah. I also
Right?
actually see money a little bit differently. I see, let me change the gears.
Yeah,
Wealth is another word, right, that people use.
of course.
To
That was going to
me,
be one of my next questions for
yeah,
you.
yeah. Wealth, I actually feel like wealth is not just about how many dollars I have in the bank. I also feel like it's the richness of relationships and the
Plus one.
opportunities you
Yeah,
create around you. And that to me is also wealth. Like me waking up one day in my bed and feel like, wow, like I love my life. To me, that is wealth
yeah.
also, just beyond like the bank account. Because truly, statistically, they actually say that, above a certain amount, once you start making above a certain amount, you don't feel necessarily any more happier.
Yeah, it's like
I
diminishing
hit that
marginal
point. I feel
returns.
like you must have hit that
Yeah,
point too.
of
It doesn't
course.
necessarily make you any happier. If
No.
anything, the more money, more problems is like a thing that people
Exactly. It
also say.
is.
So
Yeah.
how do you make that? How do you create dopamine? How do you create serotonin? After that point is purely from the richness of things in your life, whether it's people, whether it's passion activities, whether it's family.
Yeah.
That's
And I
important.
think sometimes wealth gets like a negative like rappo just because rich and wealth, a lot of people say a lot of money makes you greedy and corrupt, but I actually think it gives a certain amount of power, and wealth is actually equivalent to abundance. And abundance doesn't only have to do with money. Abundance
Correct.
has to do with
Correct.
your
Oh, I
relationships
love
and
that. I
you
love
know,
that.
and
Yes,
I
for sure.
fundamentally like agree with that too. Because I really think like you make a certain amount and there are diminishing marginal returns that you experience and you're like, what really is the purpose of life? So many people chase after money and chase after money.
Yeah.
They reach a certain age, they have all this money, they have all these material things for what? Just to impress their next door neighbor. There is a level of getting the money. Oh, I can have a gym membership that allows me to be fit. But do I really need the next thing just to make someone feel like I have a form of respect? So I think that
It
answer is
only goes so
obviously
far.
exactly. And
Yeah.
I do think that answer differs so much from person to person. But that being said, there is that point at which it becomes diminishing. You know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah. What was that for you?
what do I think of when I hear the word money?
Yeah.
I actually wrote a newsletter article on this, but this is a very interesting take that I think a lot of people get shocked by. I am obsessed with money, but not in the way that you would think. So growing up, I think I saw money from a very emotional lens. The 2008 financial crisis happened in a very formative time for me, and I could notice the smallest facial contortions in a room when money was brought up. I genuinely think that money is such a polarizing topic, and I was just so fascinated by the fact that everyone said money is logical, money is rational. Why is everyone getting so emotional about when money comes up in a conversation then?
Hmm.
And I want, especially for women, I think we're so stigmatized and socialized to not talk about money. But I'm like, money is what provides, and for me especially, like I seeked financial independence for so long in my life because, like you, it gave me power. It gave me the choice to figure out what I wanted from my life. It was that first step to like a whole plethora of options of what I could do with my life.
Hmm.
So I am obsessed with money, but not in the way of material gain, but really for what does money mean for me and what kind of freedom does it provide for me and also other people. So I'm very passionate about educating and just like bringing awareness to the fact that money is not a negative thing. Like it can be something so powerful and so empowering to other people.
I love that.
Thank you. Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Nirupa. This was so fun.
Thank you so much for having me. And people who actually don't know, we're both Telugu, so we do have
I
that
know I
common.
was should I try my Telugu with you?
You should ask me a question, and then we'll answer the question in Telugu.
Oh, things. Aim. Wait. Aim.
If you were to ask me a question on this topic, I would make you ask that in Telugu.
Okay, wait. Yeah, let me try to do it. Okay. How do you say paisa? Is that money and
Paisa.
okay? Or is that the Hindi?
Double.
Double? Oh, okay.
You can also say paisa. That's fine too.
True. If you're watching this, I'm so sorry, mom, dad, if you're watching. How do you say think?
Alochinchu.
Aim aim ఆలోచిస్తున్న నీ ఇష్టమైన తిండి ఏంటి? Is that
Um,
right?
Yes, that is correct. Which she's basically asking what's your favorite food to eat
Yes.
in Telugu.
And then you have
I'm
to
gonna
respond
answer
in
in
Telugu, and then
Telugu.
I'll translate because
Yes.
I'm pretty good at understanding Telugu.
Yeah. మా మమ్మీ వంట తింటాం నాకు చాలా ఇష్టం.
She really likes her mom's food.
Exactly.
Oh my
Can't
god.
beat that. Never.
I think we're actually like experts in Telugu. Thank you so much. It's so fun.
This is so fun too. I love talking to people, and I think it's just amazing that you're doing this with other South Asian, founders, females out there, and it's very empowering. Like, let's do more of that. Let's keep
Yeah.
going more of
Let's
that.
keep that conversation going.
Yes, let's go.
Yeah. Amazing. Thanks, Nirupa.
Thank you.